What's up, peoples? This is Jose Marquez along with my co-host Chico from the Cause and Effect crew, and we want to thank you for joining us for another Sunday BYOB podcast, where we have real conversations with real guests about real life issues. Our goals are always to stimulate the body, soul, and spirit with thought-provoking conversations, jokes, and some drama. Just like some like to bring their own bottles to parties, we ask that you bring your own Bible, perspectives, curiosity, and insight about life, today's issues, and that together we discover a better way to deal with life. I hope you're curious, because if you are,
let's go.
Super excited today. We got an amazing, phenomenal guest that I believe is going to bless all of you guys. Before I introduce him, of course, as always, Chico.
What's going on?
And our special guest, I've known him for quite a few years now. I had the pleasure of being a member of his church. Had the pleasure of reading his book that he's going to be bringing out to the world within a few weeks, that I think is going to bless just so many lives. So we actually have the privilege of getting a preview of this book. He's the pastor of Ignite Church in Newark, New Jersey, Pastor Jorge Caban.
Thank you for having me here.
Hey.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Thank you, audience.
Hey.
We love you, audience. Free books at the end. No, I'm just kidding.
So it's been exciting. I know you started this year on a 40-day fast, which is something that most of our audience doesn't understand. And then you come here, you get back to the U.S. from Costa Rica, and you run into COVID-19.
Yes.
So how has that journey? What was that journey like?
It's been crazy, because the beginning of the year when I set out to do the 40, I think the last time I came, I did my 31, and so I did 21, 31, and then I did 40. And on the 21 was kind of the instructions for the book, and it took those 3 years up to now. Pastor Marquez is helping me out with the writings, and it's been a great help to finish it, because sometimes you need someone to lift your hands up when you just can't, right?
Yeah.
But it's been a journey on how to get people, because people want to know how to, right? We need instructions on how to get to. Sometimes just going to church on Sunday is not enough, right? Personal work. How do I do this at home? How do I build myself up? The best investment you're ever going to make is in self, right? We always investing in others, investing in relationships. But when do we stop and say, I need to invest in me? Because if I invest in me, then everybody's going to benefit from that. And so this book is called Original Settings. And it came from just a flowing thought. If you know how God works, he is just flowing thoughts. And one time, it was a scene that happened at the church, and we had paid $200 for a sound engineer to come and fix our soundboard so that it could sound good, right? You can have the best musicians, right?
Yeah.
You can have the best instruments, but if you don't have a good soundboard guy to make that equalize and sound great, then it takes away from the musicians. It takes away from everything. You can tell, right? You ever been in a place and you could tell, they're good musicians, but it's just something, right? And so this soundboard, what it does, it gives it the ability to enhance it to a place where it just takes you somewhere, right? Because everything is so just in perfect harmony. So we got the sound engineer to come and do the sounding. So I'm sitting there, and he's calling the guitarist, and he's calling the singers, and testing the vocals, and he's putting everything on, and I'm looking at this, right? And so then I was like, man, that sounds really good. This is, during the week, this sounds really good. I can't wait till Sunday. I'm like, whoa, we got this ready. So that Saturday, the place where we have church at, it's an event center. So we're there on Sundays, but on Saturdays of baptism or whatever, people rent it. So we put the soundboard to the side, and it seems that someone went and started messing with the buttons. So we come Sunday, and it's the same musicians, the same instruments. Everything's the same, but it didn't sound good. And so I knew automatically that somebody was messing with the soundboard because it didn't sound good, right? And so what does the soundboard represent in our life? That's our heart, right? When we come from heaven and God creates us, he creates us in an original intent is for purpose. And when we align ourselves with that, then we understand what we're called for. But the thing is that as life goes around and we start growing up and we have the influence of our parents and the influence of our environment and the people around us, they start messing with our buttons and our soundboard. And that's when our life doesn't sound good, because the soundboard is not equalized to what the perfection that God had called it. And so our surroundings start shifting this. So how do I get back, George? And that's what the book is about. It's bringing you back to original intent. Those dreams that you have, those things that you know that there's more in you, but you never tapped into it. Sometimes the lid is put because of the people around us. And so we need to tap into the all-powerful heart. And how do you do that? How do we get there and start changing the soundboard? Because just because our external changed the soundboard, but we have the power to go back in there and put it back right. And that's, how does that look like? And this is my journey in this book, is how could I guide people to go back into the motherboard, the heart, and start changing some things and making your life sound good. It might not sound good now because people have changed and moved around settings in your life, but there's something called epigenetics, which means that you're above your genes, right? And so we have the power through our thought realm to change a couple things in our lives, right? Epi means above, where, mind over matter. We say it all the time, but do we really believe it? Because once you believe that, that means everything first starts in the invisible. God said, he's talking out of the invisible, and then matter comes out. And so we're looking at matter as the great thing, but the great thing is not matter, it's what's behind matter. We are 0.0013001 particle, and we are 99.9999939s spiritual. Yet we know more about the particle than we do of the spiritual.
and I think, that's the majority of the reason that we get in trouble so much, and we want to deny it, and we want to battle it, and we want to ignore it, but we fall back into the same issue, into the same realm. In original settings, there were two things that you just added. I thought the book was good. And then he just drops
That's after the 40 days.
Yeah, then he dropped a whole bunch of new material. And I was like, oh man, this is good.
It's like Moses with the tablets. And he's like, what? Well, that came out of my 40 days.
But the part you wrote about inception and being the parent of our thoughts, right? Kind of comparing our thoughts to children. Share some of that, because y'all need to hear that.
See, thoughts are like seeds, right? And then the origin of the seed is the father. Is it the father of lies, or is it the father of truth? And when we accept these seeds into our life and we meditate, we are feeding these thoughts. And in a sense, you're the father of these thoughts, because they only exist because you give it attention. And so attention becomes the life force for these thoughts. These thoughts, if something happened and you never thought of it again, within 72 hours, right? Neuroscience, I'm not talking about spirituality, neuroscience, 72 hours, you'll forget everything you heard unless it's attached to an emotion. Once it's attached to an emotion, now it goes into the thought realm where you're meditating on it because you feel something. And when you feel something is the engravement on that thought. So thought needs energy. It needs photons, it needs proteins, right? These are all and chemicals. It needs all this to create a thought. Now, the chemical is a part of the feeling. So if it was something negative, then it's embranded with something negative, and you're going to keep thinking about it because it has an emotion attached to it. So I'm sure that if you sit down and think about all your life, you're going to remember things that have what? An emotion attached to it. Right? You could have a scent. You could smell a scent or a cologne, and something happened with that cologne, whether it was your dad.
Remember, yeah.
You remember it. Where is that? Where was it at? It's in your heart. And so when that thing is the code. Remember, we did the page on programming, and so the code is the smell, and the smell brings out the data. The data is what? Is that thought. And now all of a sudden you're feeling the same thing as if you were 7 years old and your dad was putting that cologne on.
And he used the word that's key that connects all this. You said you remember, which is another thing you wrote in the book. It's to remember is to member something again. In other words, to put something back together again. So when you remember, you're reconnecting the original member to something that's going on right now. So that
and so when that thought or that feeling comes up, you got to understand that whatever's attached to that emotion, you're gonna feel like if it happened like you're 7 years old. Mind you, you're 40. But you're feeling the same thing. Why? That thought is connected to a chemical, and that chemistry is telling you. that he hurt you. There's pain, there's suffering, right? And so what happens in neuroscience, it says if you do nothing with that thought. So let's say you saw your dad. I'm just giving you an example. You saw your dad and he has the cologne on and it brought you back when he whipped you or he hit you or passed, right? That thought comes up and you're feeling the same chemicals. You're feeling the same anger and resentment and the bitterness. All these cortisol, all this thing is flowing through. You're mad. You're breathing hard. Your vessels are getting smaller, right? So because you're in an angry mode, right? And so if you do nothing with it, which most 99.9% of the people do, nothing with it, that thought, this is science, says it goes back, but it gets bigger. So that means if you had resentment at 8 and you did nothing with that thought, and it goes back into your hippocampus, which is your library where everything is stored, all your memories are stored. It is now a 9. The next time you see him, you're looking on with anger, not an 8, but a 9. So we see how people continue seeing somebody and get to the point of angry to murder. Now we see why. Because they've been meditating and it's coming up and coming down, and every time it comes up at a whole different level.
And I love the examples that you're using, because especially for our audience, like this is for that mother that doesn't understand why she's treating her children the same way her mother treated her. This is for that relationship that you continue to say, why do my breakups happen the same way? This is for you. Mm-hmm. You know, this is for that father that's like, man, like nobody, you know, why don't my kids? And then you look at your father, this is for you. This is for that church member. You're jumping from church to church to church, wondering why all the churches are the same. Maybe it's not the churches, maybe it's you. Mm-hmm. You know, because you're bringing your thoughts. And what Pastor George writes in Original Settings, like that part blew my mind, because you raise a child. So you know, we blame people for our life, but our lives are a product of our thoughts, and our thoughts are there because we raised them. Yeah. So we raised them to be strong. And now they're controlling us because we gave them too much strength.
Right. Yeah. You ever been in somebody's house? I remember growing up, my mom's like, mira esos muchachos malcriados. In Spanish means these are kids that are not brought up, right? And so it's because they've been undisciplined, right? And so if thoughts are our children, then and our lives are a wreck, then our thoughts are undisciplined. Our thought management and how we see things is, in other words, you don't have to meditate on everything, because remember, when you're meditating on a thought, you're giving it life, whether it's good or bad. And what happens is, after a certain amount of time, that thought, its main purpose is to hit your heart. Now, what are you talking about, George? Okay. A thought stays here on your temporal brain, right? But if you keep thinking and keep thinking and thinking and thinking, at nighttime when we go to sleep, the hippocampus does something. It rearranges what you gave interest to. Mm-hmm. And the more you feed a thought and the bigger it gets, now it takes it and it sorts it into your long-term memory. That's the problem. Because you could have an emotional problem with someone and forgive that person, and it's okay. It's gone. It's taken out. You're in your temporal. But if you keep holding on, no, he owes me, and keep thinking and holding on and holding on and holding on, while you're sleeping, your hippocampus is going through what you gave attention to, what you are giving life to. And now it says, hey, this is no longer a baby. This is a teenager. You don't belong here. You belong down here. Because see, the hippocampus doesn't discern. It's not its job to discern. It's your job to discern. Its job is to do one job. It's when it sees something that you gave interest to, we're going to keep this here. We're going to make sure you have it. And the enemy's biggest thing is to get, not to stay here. His job is to get, well, the enemy within.
So good. That's so good. And I like that you said pay attention, right? And it's weird how they put pay with attention, because when what we pay attention to, we buy. Yeah. We purchase into our lives. Now you own it, right? And it has to do with what you're sharing with the, you know, you're focusing on it. You're giving all of your attention to it. So you're paying for it. You're purchasing it. You're purchasing it over and over and over. So now your shelf is full of the thoughts that you paid attention to. And another thing that you wrote about in your book that I thought was crazy, the coding and programming.
Wow.
That one messed me up. Like, that one was really, really good. So we definitely have to touch that.
Yeah.
But before that, you used an example of your dog in the book. Mm-hmm. That you had a dog and something happened that provoked and got you into the realization that there was something that connected to that dog. Do you remember?
Right, yeah. When I was about maybe 8 or 9 years old, I had a dog. They gave me a dog, and it was my first dog. I was in love. And, it's my dog, right? So someone stole my dog. And so that had a scar, which I never realized. So as I started growing up, I had something against dogs. I was like, I don't like dogs, but why? And you was asking me, I was like, I don't know why. But it wasn't until I started writing this and started analyzing this, I said, okay, let me go dig. And when I started digging, the reason I don't like dogs is because it's connected to an emotion that I suffered. And so as a protective mechanism, my hippocampus is pushing it away because it has to do with pain. Wow. And so I literally had to go back into my past and forgive who stole that dog from me. So now we're buying a dog. But anyway, I'm okay with dogs now. But just to show you, yeah. Mind you, I'm 45. I'm 51 now. But this has been since I was about 45 that I figured out. Hold on, the problem. Why I don't like you look at a dog. I love dogs, and I could be like looking at the same dog. I hate dogs. The difference is our perception, and our perceptions are built through our thoughts and our pain and whatever filter we're seeing it through. So my filter was that someone stole it and broke my heart. And so as a protective mechanism, I was automatically perceiving the dog as something you stay away from. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. But nobody was telling me why. Because your subconscious is not going to tell you why, right? This is the personal development that you do going into the motherboard and changing a couple of things on the motherboard.
You know, I wanna speak on that too, because going through, certain things in my life currently has made me question why I act or react to certain things and why I'm so easily triggered. And I've been discovering going to therapy in a sense, it has to do with my childhood, seeing how my parents dealt with jealousy and stuff like that. So I'm like, why do I get so cold when I feel like someone's going somewhere I don't want to go, but I don't want you to go. Like, I do the same exact thing my mom does, where it's she gets completely cold, doesn't speak to you, and might make you sit and stay away from her. That you're not going in the bedroom tonight. Sleep with one of the kids or stay on the sofa. And I had to dig deep into like remembering arguments and seeing that and saying, wow, I'm doing the same exact thing that she does. So I'm normalizing that in my life, but I don't know why.
Yeah, and in the neuroscience, they call it a mirrored neurons. So we have neurons that are mirror whatever's around you. So whatever you see without you even thinking, you're recording. So the first 7 years of your life, nobody's asking you what should be done. At the first 7 years, you're just recording everything. So you're recording habits. Your first 7 years is teaching you how to live life in the culture, right? So you're looking at attitudes, you're looking at behaviors, right? And all these things are being recorded in your heart, right? Your first mind is not this one. Your first mind is your heart. And so it's recorded there. From 7 to 12 is called the alpha stage. It's when you start analyzing the external. By the time you hit 13, which is what they consider puberty, is when your subconscious and your mind, they come together. It's like a coming together. That's why the voice starts changing. And now you start mixing all this wisdom. For the first 7 years, whatever was recorded, nobody asked. You didn't ask, let me delete this. You can't. It's just there. So from, I think it's the third semester, when you're in the belly, you're already recording. So if your mom is arguing with your dad, it's already be recording. You're already recording those emotions. You're already. That's why some kids, they grow up and you see them sad. And it's because probably the parents was always arguing and in the belly and I don't want, and all these negative thoughts. Because you know that words is a frequency, and that frequency has data, right? Like we know airwaves, right? It's data in these waves. So they're in the water. It's going right through. They're getting it. They're hearing it. And so now this, a sum total of the last semester was environment. That's why it's so important with environment. But as far as I'm concerned, I wasn't raised up with an awareness like this. Right? Mm-hmm. So awareness is like, I'm aware. So if it's someone who's pregnant, I'm going to be like, do you know what's going on now? Let's sit down for a little bit so you can understand that emotions play a big part in where you're at, because the baby's feeling what you're feeling. And then for the first 7 years, every word, every negative word, they're just receiving. They don't know anything. They don't know how to discern. And so at 7 to 8, people are like, I don't know why that kid came out like that. Well, it's the surroundings. created him. You're a product of the environment, right? Now you got a kid running around into walls, and they're like, okay, I can't figure it out. Well, I don't know why he runs into walls.
I have a little cousin that she's like paranoid and scared of everything.
Where'd that come from?
Her mother is the same exact
Exact thing.
way. She worries about everything and anything that can happen in the world.
That
to
is
her.
right. That's an adjustment of the original settings, right? So that means she wasn't born with that, but the mother started moving the soundboard, and now she is duplicating the mom, right? I'll give you an example. A baby's born and it's in the water. They know how to swim by natural. You know when they stop learning how to swim? With the fear of the parents. Stay away from that water. Stay away from the water. So now it connects.
Was my mother's fault. I knew it was my mother's fault.
And so he goes to soundboard again. Now the child starts adapting that fear. So fear is a learned behavior.
100%.
Right. So here we go again. We're not born with fear. We're not born to look at black and white. We're not. These are things that are settings that are being distorted by our external, right? And then we grow up, and it's like, man, we need to have. Then nobody even asks me anything, right? And so now I'm like this. Nobody asks me if I wanted to be like this or not want to be like this. And so the book is how to go back to the original settings. Let's go back to the beginning and let's start going back to where is that place of peace where God dwells, right? Because you got to unwind. You got to do a lot of unwinding. But the thing is this, like we were talking about earlier, it takes discipline. If you don't take discipline time to spend in self, then how are you going to think about a programmer? A programmer is inside of a computer programming. They spend a lot of time programming. So imagine that, but your heart is the program, right? And so you're deleting some files, because sometimes we have to delete some files. Like if you have a negative thought and it keeps coming up, what do you do with it? Nobody ever told me that, hey, once you deal with it, right, and apply some grace, apply some love, let that person go. Because scientifically, they've seen people as they put these big machines in their minds, and they're telling the person to think about this person. And then they're telling the person, I want you to forgive them. And literally, they see the disconnection in the mind. The synaptic connections on the mind starts breaking. This is science. I'm not even talking the Bible. This is, you can look it up on YouTube. I love YouTube. Everything I say, you can go and prove me wrong. Go to YouTube, because the best school there is around. And so now it's kind of like God is being backed up, and the science world is going, by the way, that's true. But God said it 4,000 years ago because God created us. He knows how we work. Why he says love your enemy. Why? It's not for him, it's for you. And because every time you don't, guess what happens? Neuroscience, it gets bigger and it gets bigger and gets bigger until now you're depressed, now you're oppressed, now you're possessed. I mean, there's a lot of S's on that because you are, I call it, you're an accountant of offenses. You become an accountant. Everybody that did you something wrong, you got a little mark. He did this, he did this, he did this, he did this. And now you have all these bills that people owe you, right? But yet you go in the morning, you go in the morning and say, God, thank you for forgiving me. So you'll receive the forgiveness, but you have your tab in the back for others. And then you figure that you're going to have freedom. You don't have freedom. That's bondage. If you can't let go of your debt to the past, you're in bondage. I don't care where you go, what therapy you go. You don't let go, and someone doesn't teach you how to do it, you will be in bondage all your life. The only time you feel freedom is when you are in a casket. You're free. Other than that, you can be oppressed, possessed, and depressed, all because of the past. And again, mirrored neurons is, you ever seen a little baby when they tell them, open their mouth, you go, ah, well, the baby goes, ah, right? So just as like that, so is emotion. So as however you treat your wife, the kid is looking. Guess what he's going to do when he grows up? The same thing.
That is so good. And I think, you know, for our audience, that we have a lot of information coming at you. That's why it's on video, so you can rewind, so you can play it over.
Yeah.
What I you know, advise people to do is hear it all the way through. Then the second time you hear it, take notes. Because then you're gonna be remembering something positive instead of remembering something negative, and you're forming these new thoughts within your mind, within your mindset. You know, in my own life, I went through a very traumatic experience as a child. I don't want to get into the details because I don't want to put people that I love on blast like that. But it was so traumatic that it spilled into my first marriage. Like it was just a wreck. And then I came into it a wreck because of things that happened during my childhood. You know, I brought in thoughts into a whole relationship that didn't have to do with that person, and hurt people and created all types of chaos. And little did I know, like, and this is something from pastor to pastor, we blame demons, ghosts, and goblins. You know, everything
The
is
mystical, watch
you
it.
know, now the curtain moves, it was
Yeah.
the devil, you know. But at the end of the day, like, these are mindsets and mentalities and
Filters.
learned behaviors a lot of times, right? We use curses. That's the biblical word. That's what. But psychologists use learned behaviors.
Exactly.
Lo mismo.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing. A learned
Different
behavior.
language, same thing. You know, it's
And you say it over and over in original settings. You know, God has used science to reaffirm Scripture.
the
Like,
greatest
there's a lot
time.
of people that are intimidated by this sometimes. A lot of people are angry at God, right? Because they're angry at a person. They haven't forgiven the person, so they connect God to the person. But we're talking science now. Like, this is psychology, this is biology, this is physiology. These are all of the things that we pay thousands of dollars to learn in a college, but we're putting them together in a structured form, and you've put it together in I would say a textbook.
That
Like,
sounds
Original Settings is
insane.
a Christian textbook that doesn't have to be used by only Christians. Why? Because it's based on science.
I love the state of age we're in, right? So a lot of people talking now about I'm awoke. You heard that? Yeah, I'm woke, right?
Yeah.
And so people will always
Said it in the rapper voice
Right.
here.
Yeah, well,
we're designed to go after God. We're designed for that, right? And I want to share this little nugget I got on 40-day fasting. You didn't have to go. I'll just tell you. I think it was maybe day 31, and so I saw a rock, and the rock was gray and it was beige, and the Lord tells me, well, what color is that rock? I said, well, I think it's earth tone. Okay, tell me another color. Beige, gravel, right? He said, if 10 people were around this rock and they all give it different names, will their names change the rock? I was like, no. So just because people describe God in a different format doesn't change who God is. In other words, science is trying to figure out God, and they put a language to it, right? Quantum physics, energy. We call it spiritual, right? And so intention. If 5 people get together and we put intent that there is some kind of coherence that comes together and it sends out
law of attraction.
right. What is man trying to describe God in the best way that they can?
And they make money off of it.
Yeah.
Something that God gave us for free, like The Secret. The Secret's been shouted for so many years, and now they wrote a book called The Secret. So all those principles are in here.
Exactly.
And you know, like I love this, and I love the fact that you're able to bring these spiritual truths and water it down and show it, teach it in a way throughout the book that is gonna help people to really like restructure their life, restructure their family, bless their children, I mean, whoever touches this book is going to be blessed because it's a very personal book, right? This is something it begins with me. Like it begins with me. And that's why, like, when I read the whole coding and programming, I'm like, man, my programs, Lord. my coding.
Yeah.
And I want you to talk about the differences between those two things. What's programming and what's coding?
Okay. So coding, let's say, I'll give you an example. If you go to an ATM, right, and you put your card in, you got to put a code. And when you put a code in, it opens your program. So the program is your name, how much money's in there, all the stuff, right? And then in there is a setting that you can even change that, right? And so coding is what recalls a memory. Like I was saying about a cologne. It could be a car. It could be a place. It could be you could visit a house that you was raised up in. All of a sudden, that is the code to pull up the program. How do you know there's still a program? Because it's being pulled up. And so then what do we do with these programs? Right? The code could be a girl, or somebody say Mary or Maria, and all of a sudden you had a bad experience with Maria. That Maria becomes the code, right? It's 1010. Your
Freaking
pin.
Marias, yo.
Sorry, Maria. This is a common name. So now watch this. So if Maria is the code, is the pin, right? 1010. Now what happens is when you see her, you're looking at her, and this is happening in milliseconds. It's going in. Maria is the code 1010. Now what is going in, what's happening is looking for the program. And it's gonna pull up the program and all the junk that's in it. And you'd be like, oh, I got over Maria. No, you didn't. You just saw Maria. You was just pissed for 3 days. You still like, you still in love with Maria.
And I'm hoping, audience, that you guys are catching this, that you're catching, that you're thinking
so
through
good.
examples in your own life. That person that just messes up your whole day, and you're like, oh, they just messed up my day. Why?
Right.
Why does their mere presence have to mess up your day?
It's
Why
'cause
does
it's a
somebody
program.
mentioning their name have to mess up your
This
day?
is a
Because
program.
It's a program.
Right? So the program is in your heart. And then if you leave it there, it's only going to get worse. Right? And so I believe that the book, my biggest journey with this book, if someone reads it, is to have someone at a place where they're buttonless. In other words, nobody could press their buttons. Because if someone could press your buttons, you don't have control over you. They have control over you. If I got to go to a party and see someone who takes my joy into and switches it around, that person has a button on me. And I have no control over it. So I don't know about you, but I like to have control over me. I like to have control over my emotions. And it starts where if you see that, I always say it's like a check engine. You ever seen a check engine? A check engine? It means check your engine. I mean, get out the car, open the hood, and check your engine. There's something wrong with it, right? And when you see that happen, that you see someone and that emotion is pulled up, it's a check engine. It's a time for you to check your heart because that shouldn't happen, right? But what do we do normally? Let's get out of here. You react. Let's go. You run. But it doesn't mean that that emotion or that state of history or past, it goes anywhere. It goes right back in, right? Now think about it. I don't know about you, but I learned this in math. I love math, right? Something negative is something that what? Takes away. Yes. Something positive is something that adds. And so if you have a bunch of negative thoughts in your heart, what is it taken from? From what God has given you. That's why sometimes we feel stuck because God has given us, but the negative thoughts in our lives are taken away. Scientifically proven, when you wake up in the morning, you got 100% database. And if you have something negative stored away, you might not even know it, but it's taking 30% of your life. How do I know that, George? Well, by 2 o'clock, you're dead tired. You were sitting all day. So it's a spiritual thing.
And combine that math to how many thoughts we have a day that are recycled thoughts.
We have 60,000 thoughts a day. 90% are recycled, meaning 90% are reoccurring thoughts. Only 10% are new. This is science. I'm not even bringing Bible.
Do that math.
So 90% of your thoughts, so 50, if you have 60,000 thoughts a day, 50,000 are reoccurring. If they're negative, then where they're at. They're inside your heart. Science, medical science says if 65% of your hippocampus or your heart is negative, you're in depression. And you know how they figure that out? They show you pictures. And how you answer your pictures is what they know what's in your heart. And
it's powerful. It's powerful. And again,
and it's
you're
spiritual,
definitely going
right?
to have to rewind this video over and over.
It's spiritual, but we're bringing science. Science is just catching up. I love the way Einstein says, I believe in God because the characters of God are seen in the harmony of the universe, right? This is Einstein because it's just that they're figuring out that there's no way this all could happen if it was not a God behind it, right? And so now science is even figuring out thoughts. Now, you know, if I was to take an x-ray of your brain, I'm not going to see what you're thinking, right? Because it's spiritual.
Yes.
And so now we see science tapping into the mystic. And so all science is doing is demystifying the mystic.
So powerful. It's so powerful. And it's reclaiming. It's kind of like reclaiming our God-given right to be sane. Regaining, retaking our God-given right to be mentally healthy. You know, and this is a book that's coming out at the perfect time, I believe, because, you know, if COVID did anything,
Mental health.
it made us be still. It made us you know, it was just us with us. Like,
I thought
you couldn't run away from you.
Yeah.
You know, and I think this is why, like, there was a spike in mental health issues. There was a spike in all these.
Well, we just seen the beginning. We haven't seen the aftermath of this
at all.
We haven't even touched the aftermath because I'm sure that if we check a year or 2 years from now, you'll see the aftermath of depression and anxiety pills and all this stuff going to a different level, because people, when they can't understand something, they'll go to a doctor. A doctor is not there to cure you. They're there to take care of you. And they'll give you something to care you, but not cure you. Because at the end of the day, if 98% of sicknesses happen through our thought realm, then that means 98% of our healings come through our thought realm.
Let's go.
You know what I love? You know what I love about using science? That instead of using science to debunk God, you're looking at it in a way to reaffirm God.
He's been saying it all along.
that that exists. Whatever you want to call it, energy, God.
Right.
Exists.
It's like the rock, you know, however you want to describe who God is in your life and however you perceive him, how you name him doesn't change the rock. The rock is still the rock. Jesus is still Jesus. If you say, sun in the sky, because let's say we go to one of those remote islands and there's a group of tribesmen and you talk to them, they got a spiritual guru in there. You'd be like, how they figure that out? But this spiritual guru has to do with what? Connecting with earth and connecting with the tree and connecting with, right? So there's an essence of looking for God, right? And so here's this guru that his heart was after God, and this is his description. Doesn't mean that he's not talking about Jesus.
That's so good.
You follow what I'm saying? Because nobody
Absolutely.
preach about Jesus, but they have a
Yeah.
spirituality because we're all have the God gene inside to go back where we came from. And so there's always a search for this God, right? Even if you're in a remote island and nobody else, there's going to be an essence of, you're out there somewhere. You created me. You follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And it says, the psalmist said, deep calls unto deep. Like there's some deepness within all of
All of us.
humanity.
All of us.
That's calling out, that's
Come on.
seeking. And unfortunately, we end up seeking it in all the wrong places. but God is that constant. God is that ever-present being that's saying, all right, don't worry. Keep looking over there. You're coming. You're getting closer. You're getting closer. Yeah. And I think it's so many times it's us. Like, is that pastor? It's that religious mind. It's that spiritual leader that's so intimidated by no, you gotta. It's this way. This is how you gotta call them. These are his seven names.
This
These are
is God.
Yeah, and it's
And that's it.
only
And
your
yeah.
box.
And either you fit the box or you're not in the box. And you can't put God in a box.
At all. And I think that's what BYOB is meant to be. We're meant to be that program that's going to take God, completely shred that box, throw pieces of the box all over the place, and present God in a way that's attainable.
Yeah.
Remove all the obstacles that are in the way, because that's one of the things that's in the way. Like, people are on a journey. Yeah. And the same way God brought me in his own way, the same way he brought him from witchcraft.
10 years of witchcraft.
He could bring him from witchcraft. God could do anything, bro.
He pulled me out of the pit.
It's hard for him.
I was in a pit.
I was in a pit.
So God has his
Wow,
way of
man.
bringing people. It's our responsibility to present him in a way that's attainable.
Yeah.
If you could share in the next few minutes, this is the message of Original Settings. If you could say it right in there, what would you tell them?
The message is this. When the Bible talks about, for God so loved the world, loved you, he gave. We see the notion of God in this John 3:16, the most popular verse in the world. And it talks about gave. Now, if I give you something, you're going to see my hands way before you see my heart. And so this book is about seeing God's hands in your life. And if you see God's hands in your life, you're going to go after his heart. And so the book, I'm not leading anyone into any religion. I'm just showing you the light. Let the light illuminate who God is in your life. And that is my big win in the book. It's not to convert no one, but to have an awareness that there is a God, and he's going to demonstrate who he is through this book, because you're going to see his hands. What do you mean you're going to see his hands? You're going to see God moving in your life. You're going to see God doing things in your life. Why? You're following principles. God is not a respecter of a person. He's a respecter of principles. You put these principles to work in your life, sooner or later, you're going to see everything come into place that you have no other choice than to find out who those hands belong to.
Amen. Amen. Woo. This is one of those messages, for our audience, that is not meant to get you excited. It's meant to empower you. We're trying to empower you. We're trying to give you the tools that will allow you to do that inner work that all of us could do.
Yeah.
God has given all of us that.
We're
that
all
power.
inner engineers. When you look at it,
Yes.
right? So sound engineer, original settings about being your own inner engineer, and your soundboard is your heart, and just bringing it back into its place of its original intent.
So good. Guys, as always,
Amazing.
share, forward, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and let other people know that BYOB is bringing something a little bit different. We love you guys. We bless you. Pastor George's book, Original Settings, will be out in a few weeks. Be on the lookout for it. You're seeking a church. You're in that Newark area. It's 12. Is it 1200?
1100 McCarter Highway.
1100
right across
McCarter
the
Highway.
street from Lit 21. Come on, somebody.
It's right there. God bless you guys. It's been good. It's been good.